All right, in this video, what I want to do is take you through how you can break your code up into more manageable pieces, which basically, for example, if I look at the code that we had here for our favorite cities example that we keep going through, you'll notice that it's already getting kind of busy. There's a lot of code here, and it can be hard to kind of see what the structure is. Of course, we can use our code collapsing and so forth to kind of get a feel for what we have. But really, it's probably time to break this up into a couple files so that we don't just have one big file that has everything in it. So what I'm going to do is show you how to do that. You know, at the top level here, we have this navigation view, and I'm going to leave that. That's a good logical starting place in the content view. But then this list is really the main section here, along with some modifiers on here for things to do when we first appear and also setting the navigation title in the toolbar. So all of that I want to kind of break out into something more manageable. So to do that, what we can do is go to list, and I can hold down the command and hit click like we would to embed it into, let's say, another view. But what we're going to do is now extract it to a subview. And when we do that, I'll click that, you'll notice that it took all of that code, including the modifiers that went with it, and it brought it out into a separate struct here in this file. And then it's giving us some a spot where we can rename it. So I might call this city list. And notice as I type up here for where we're going to call this view, the struct down here has been renamed as well. So I'll just hit city list and enter. And I now have actually taken everything that was here and made it a separate view down here. Now, don't worry about the compiler errors yet. We're going to address those. But the main thing is that we've been able to easily separate out this struct from here just by using the command click and then picking that option. So the next thing we need to understand is that favorite cities, as an example here, is what we were referencing before. And we were able to see it because we were sitting here and this property right here was visible to us. And so that worked. But now that this struct is a separate struct, it's completely separate from this one, it doesn't have visibility to favorite cities anymore. And so somehow we need to pass that down as a parameter to this view so that it can see it. So the way we are going to do that is basically declare a new property here called favorite cities. So I'll do that as an @state var, and we'll call it favorite cities. And then we need to tell it how it's defined. And we're going to do that. Basically, it's an array of this favorite cities struct, right? So what we can do here is just say favorite cities. And we have now declared this property, favorite cities, which is an array of favorite cities. And we notice that all of our error messages go away. So now it's saying, hey, this is completely defined for what we need for this particular view. Now, the other thing, though, is we now have an error up here, and it says that you're calling basically this view called city list. And you're not giving it any parameters, but it's saying it needs one. And the reason it's saying it needs one is because right here, this property of this struct was declared, but you'll notice it wasn't initialized to anything. We didn't give it any initial value. And therefore, it's saying when you call this, you're going to need to initialize it. And so as you define state variables here, or any properties for that matter, whether they're have the property wrapper of state on them or not, if they're not initialized, you're going to need to pass a parameter here to do it. Let me just show you as an example. If I change this to equal, and then I say open close paren, which is basically what that is doing is giving us an initializer that's saying this guy is initialized now to an empty array. then our error message goes away and our build compiled fine. And that's because it's saying, well, you don't need to pass anything, because basically the way this is initialized, it will get an initial value when it first comes into existence, and you're good to go. But it's also possible that we could still pass something. So for example, if I were to go back here and hit open paren, it's saying, hey, you have the choice of not supplying anything, but you also have the choice of initializing favorite cities. So I don't really care for this method too much, because I think it leaves it open to a little bit of error. So what I'm going to do is go back to this, which is basically just saying that we are declaring this, we're declaring this property, and now we need to initialize it. So we can come up here and we can do open paren, and now notice it doesn't give us any other choices, it's just favorite cities. So we could tap that, and now we just fill in the property that we have here is what's going to get passed down. So favorite cities is what we're going to put here. And now if we do another build, we have a build succeeded. And if we do a resume over here, it looks like we get the green arrow, and we're still actually running the code. And so we're good to go. Now, what's nice about this is as I look at my content view, it's very clear. It starts out as a navigation view, and then it calls the city list view. And that's just another view. And you should think about the city list view no different than text or image or any of those other views that you've used already. It's now your own view. It's the view that you've created, and you're passing it the data that it needs when it first comes into existence. And just to prove that this still works, if I were to delete Chicago, for example, and say done, and then let's tap into San Francisco, when I come back, notice Chicago came back because down here we still had that on appear where we're reinitializing our property to all 5 cities. So that's a great way to separate things out. But the only other thing I don't like about this is we still have everything in one file. And what I'd like to do is take the city list and get it out into a separate file, so that what you have over here on the left as you build up your code is you're going to have files for each one of your views generally. So we'll come over here, make sure this is selected, and then we'll do Command N, and we're going to pick usually between these two things: a Swift file, which is where you might just declare a random struct or some other what we call model data. Swift UI view is what we want, and so we're going to click Next here, and we're going to give it the same name as this name for the struct. So we'll call it city list. And so when I do that, the city list file has been created. And notice now it's saying, it's kind of complaining because we've redeclared city list from this city list here. So what I'm going to do is just copy this whole thing. And I'm going to cut that out of here. And I'll go here, and I will select all this and paste it. So now all I've done is I've just moved what was here to here. And let's just comment out our preview for a second. But if I were to do a build now, because all I did is just move the structure to a different file, we still compile, and over here we still run. And the demonstration of that is also to show that because this is in a separate file, it is still visible to all of your code in Swift. And this is not true in other languages where you have to import it or include it in some other way. We don't need to do that. Where you do need to do these imports and so forth is when you have frameworks, which is a whole nother topic. We didn't create another framework. We just created another Swift UI view, and we put it in a separate file, and that's great because now we just have this code in this file. And down here, up here on the content view, now look how simple our code looks. We literally see that we have this one property, which is this array, and then we have our var body, which all views have, and it shows that it has a navigation view, and we have the city list view that is inside this navigation view. And again, we would find that this all works properly as is. Now, the only final thing is when we come over here to city list, um, generally you should try to keep these previews working. I mean, it's totally reasonable to say, well, this one is working and it's just trivially this, so I don't need to go create another one. But what happens is as you continue to break down into different views, those views, it's nice to have them render on the canvas so that you can adjust them without dealing with your whole program. So let's go back and bring this back, and we'll see that it doesn't compile. And the reason it doesn't compile is really the same reason that the previous entry up here wouldn't compile unless we added this favorite cities parameter in. So if we come back here to city list, and it says, oh, you're missing the argument, I will go ahead and click this and hit fix. And now we have to pass it an array of cities. And probably the easiest way to do that is I will just copy this. And we'll make this a var. And when you do this in previews, they need to have the word static in front of them, so they are unchangeable. And now we can say favorite cities and do another build. And when we do that, we should get build succeeded, which we did. Now over here, let's go ahead and resume our canvas. And now we get this funky looking view or rendering. And the reason is that the list and all the things that we did up here assume that you're in a navigation view. For example, if you're adding .navigation title, that only is going to work if you're inside a navigation view. .toolbar only works if you're inside a navigation view. And this preview is not in a navigation view. So let's fix that. So we can just go down here and say navigation view, and we'll move this in here and rebuild. And look at this. We are back to where things are looking good again. So this is now back to where we were. So again, the summary is that you want to break out your views when you can. You don't have to, but it really will simplify your code longer term. There's a little bit of work to make sure that you're passing the data in now that it might have already had visibility to originally, but it really is going to make your code a lot more maintainable and readable.